She lounged in my pool like she'd just been crowned queen of suburbia, oversized sunglasses perched on her nose, a fruity drink sweating in her manicured hand, while three of her loyal minions bobbed on inflatables around her. "This community asset really brings us all together, doesn't it?" she cooed to her little court, voice dripping with that fake neighborly sweetness every HOA president perfects. I stood at the gate, key in my palm, and didn't say a word at first. Just slid it into the lock, clicked it shut, and watched her smile freeze mid-sip. That's when the screaming started. "He's stealing community property. Call the police," she shrieked, splashing toward the fence like a wet cat in designer swimwear. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that every second of her little pool party had been recorded on cameras I'd hidden months earlier, time-stamped, and already backed up to the cloud. Because this wasn't about a key. This was about a woman who thought she could rewrite deeds with a smile and a clipboard, and I was finally done letting her. When I first rolled into Pinecrest Estates 2 years ago, I wasn't hunting for drama. I was a 38-year-old systems analyst who'd just survived a brutal divorce and a city apartment that smelled like regret and takeout. The foreclosure sign on the corner duplex had been up for 18 months. Cracked concrete, algae-choked pool the color of pea soup, weeds tall enough to hide a small car. Everyone else saw an eyesore. I saw a blank canvas and a chance to breathe again. County records showed the pool parcel, half the deck, the entire equipment shed, and the back gate, sat squarely on my lot line. Taxes paid, deed transferred, everything clean. I poured my savings and every weekend into that place. New tile, new filter, fresh cedar fence that actually matched the house. For 6 glorious weeks I floated in my own water at sunset. No neighbors, no drama, just the sound of cicadas and quiet victory. Then the pastel envelopes started arriving. The first one came on a Tuesday morning, slipped under my wiper blade like a parking ticket from hell. Notice of violation, unauthorized modification to community recreation area. I actually laughed out loud in my driveway. Community recreation area? The pool had been abandoned for years. But the signature at the bottom was unmistakable. Victoria Lang, HOA president. Everyone called her Karen behind her back, but to her face it was always Mrs. Lang, with the same reverence people reserve for actual royalty. She ran the board like it was the Pentagon. Monthly newsletters printed on glossy paper, community standards that somehow always seemed to target anyone who didn't wave at her exactly right. I walked into the HOA office that same afternoon carrying my closing packet and the sweetest smile I could fake. The place smelled like vanilla air freshener and quiet desperation. Karen sat behind a desk covered in color-coded files, pastel blouse ironed within an inch of its life. "Oh, you must be the new owner of the old Miller place," she said without looking up from her laptop. "We've been maintaining that pool for the neighborhood since the bank took it over. Such a community asset. We'll keep handling it for you. No need to worry." I slid the deed across her desk. "Appreciate the offer, but according to county records the parcel is mine now. Private property. I'll take it from here." Her smile never wavered, but her eyes did that thing where they go flat like a shark's. "Sweetheart, that's not how things work in Pinecrest. Historic maintenance rights and all that. We've invested thousands in that pool. The neighbors rely on it." She tapped a manicured nail on a thick binder labeled Bylaws, revised 2023. "We'll just continue collecting the standard maintenance dues from the surrounding homes." Fair is fair. Fair. That word would haunt me. Because what Karen really meant was control. She'd spent 8 years turning Pinecrest into her own little fiefdom. Grass no taller than 3 inches, American flags only on approved poles, holiday lights taken down by January 5th, or else. Neighbors nodded along because arguing meant yellow violation envelopes and whispered gossip at the mailbox. I thanked her politely and left. Big mistake. 3 days later the real campaign began. Another envelope. Failure to submit pool chemical logs for community safety review. Then, unauthorized key duplication on shared gate. Then the classic. My new fence was 0.8 inches too close to the property line. I stood in my kitchen staring at the stack, coffee going cold, and felt the first real burn of disbelief. I'd replaced every rotten board myself. I'd paid the back taxes the bank forgot. And now this woman was charging me for maintaining water that legally belonged to me. I started paying attention. The white HOA truck cruised past my house twice a day now, slowing to a crawl. Karen walked her yappy little Pomeranian along my fence line every single morning, pausing just long enough to peer through the slats at her pool. One afternoon, I caught her actually taking photos of my new pump through the fence. When I stepped outside and asked what she was doing, she didn't even flinch. Just documenting community assets, Ethan. We like to keep records. Transparency, you know. Transparency. The woman had turned my backyard into her personal surveillance project and called it civic duty. That night, I pulled every document I had and compared them against the HOA's online map. The discrepancy was blatant. 4 feet of deck and the entire equipment pad sat on my side of the official county line. I ran it through the public GIS portal 3 times. No mistake. The pool wasn't shared. It was mine. They just kept using it when the previous owner defaulted, and nobody had ever challenged them. Until me. I brought printed maps to the next board meeting, calm as could be. Karen presided like a judge in a cardigan. When I stood up during open forum and politely explained the mapping error, she didn't even blink. We're well aware of the historical usage, Ethan. The community has enjoyed that pool for years. Let's not make this difficult for everyone. The room murmured agreement like trained seals. Someone in the back actually whispered, "Just cooperate, new guy." I sat down, but something inside me had shifted. This wasn't about money or even the pool anymore. It was about the slow, smiling way certain people rewrite reality until you start doubting your own paperwork. Karen wasn't enforcing rules. She was protecting her throne. And thrones, I was learning, don't give up ground without a fight. The next few weeks turned the neighborhood into a pressure cooker wearing khakis. New flyers appeared in every mailbox. Trash cans must be returned to curb by 7:15 a.m. Sharp. Holiday decorations require committee pre-approval. Pool access temporarily restricted pending safety audit. Every rule conveniently tightened around my property. Neighbors who used to wave now crossed the street when they saw me coming. Lawnmowers went silent the second I stepped outside. Conversations died mid-sentence. Karen had turned the entire block into her personal audience, and I was the villain in her little suburban soap opera. I stopped fighting the notices. Instead, I started documenting. Every yellow envelope went into a folder. Every voicemail got saved. I bought 4 cheap security cameras and aimed them at the gate, the deck, the fence line, labeled the footage by date like a paranoid librarian. At night, I'd sit by the pool listening to the new filter hum and wonder how many other people in Pinecrest had quietly surrendered their own backyards just to keep the peace. Karen's daily fence walks grew bolder. One evening, she actually leaned over the gate and called out, "Lovely evening, Ethan. The water looks so inviting. You really should share more." I smiled back and said nothing. Inside, I was already building the trap she didn't know she was walking into. The harassment didn't slow down. It evolved into performance art. The HOA newsletter that month featured a glossy spread titled, "Keeping Our Community Safe and Beautiful," with a not-so-subtle paragraph about certain residents creating unsafe conditions near shared amenities. No names, of course. Just a photo of my fence with the caption, "Remember, rules protect us all." Someone spray-painted, "Follow the bylaws" on my trash can in drippy red letters. Another neighbor started parking his SUV halfway across my driveway by accident. I'd wave. They'd suddenly remember something urgent inside their house. My partner Sarah started cracking under the weight. "Maybe we just sell, Ethan. It's not worth the stress." But every time I looked at the pool I'd rebuilt with my own hands, something in me refused to fold. This wasn't their land. It was never their land. And if I gave in now, the next person who bought a foreclosure would get the same treatment. So I kept quiet, kept recording, and waited for Karen to make the mistake that would end her little empire. She made it on a perfect Saturday in June. I came home from the hardware store to the sound of laughter echoing from my own backyard. Music thumped, some awful yacht rock playlist, and the gate I'd padlocked the night before hung wide open. Through the fence slats I saw them. Karen and 5 of her inner circle floating on my inflatables, drinks balanced on the deck I'd poured, towels draped over the chairs I'd assembled. One of her friends was literally taking a selfie with the pool equipment in the background like it was a resort. Karen tilted her sunglasses down, looked straight at the camera I'd mounted above the shed, and announced loud enough for the mic to catch. Nothing beats a perfect day in our community oasis. Cheers to great leadership. I stood there for a full minute, blood pounding in my ears, then did the only thing that made sense. I walked to the gate, pulled it shut, and clicked the padlock. Click. The music cut off mid-chorus as heads turned. Karen's face went from smug to stunned in 0.3 seconds. "What do you think you're doing?" she demanded, splashing toward the fence in her designer one-piece. "Taking back what's mine," I said calmly. "You're trespassing. Leave." Her laugh was pure venom wrapped in sugar. "This is a community pool, Ethan. You can't just lock people out. Open this gate right now." I held up my phone, already streaming to the cloud. "Smile for the camera, Karen. You're live on my property." That's when she lost it. She dialed 911 with wet fingers, voice shaking with righteous fury. "Yes, officer, there's a man here who's stolen HOA property and is holding us hostage at the pool. Hurry." Her friends started filming too, narrating like true crime podcasters. "He's gone crazy. This is insane." The sheriff arrived 20 minutes later, lights flashing, but no sirens. By then half the neighborhood had wandered over, phones out, whispering. Karen met him at the gate still dripping, playing the victim like she'd rehearsed it. "Officer, he changed the locks on community property. We've maintained this pool for years." The deputy looked at me, then at the gate, then at Karen. "Ma'am, whose name is on the deed?" she sputtered. I just handed him the folder I'd been carrying for months. Survey, GIS printouts, tax receipts, everything. He flipped through it, eyebrows climbing. "This looks private to me. You folks need to vacate the premises." Karen's face went the color of spoiled milk. "This is outrageous. I'll have the entire board." But the deputy was already walking away, muttering into his radio. The crowd dispersed slowly, some of them actually looking embarrassed for the first time. Karen and her entourage sloshed out through the side gate I'd unlocked, shooting me death glares the entire way. As she passed, she hissed low enough that only I could hear. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life." I smiled for the first time in months. "No, Karen. You did." That night, the emergency HOA meeting invite hit every mailbox. Urgent session, breach of community trust, mandatory attendance. Her name in bold at the bottom like a royal decree. I spent the next 3 days turning my folder into a weapon. Arthur, the retired surveyor, had confirmed every line with orange flags and a signed statement. I synced 12 camera feeds into one devastating timeline. And I waited. The community hall smelled like burnt coffee and fear the night of the meeting. Every chair filled. Karen stood at the front beside a projector, hair perfectly coiffed, smile sharp enough to cut glass. "Thank you all for coming on short notice," she began, voice syrupy. "We have a serious situation. One resident has unlawfully seized control of a shared facility and endangered our children's safety." She gestured at me like I was Exhibit A. "Ethan here has locked out paying members and displayed outright hostility toward the board." Murmurs rippled. A few loyalists clapped on cue. I sat perfectly still, laptop bag on my lap, letting her dig the hole deeper. "Ethan," she purred, turning that smile on me like a spotlight. "Would you care to explain why you believe you can steal community property and lock out your neighbors?" I stood slowly, walked to the front table, and set my laptop down. The room went quiet. "Sure," I said. "But first let's talk about what actually belongs to whom." Karen's eyes narrowed. "You cannot use personal media without board approval." I hit play anyway. The projector flared to life. There she was, 10 feet tall on the screen, floating in my pool, drink raised. Nothing beats a perfect day in our community oasis. The timestamp glowed, June 14th. The next clip rolled, her unlocking the gate with her own key ring, letting friends in like it was her private club. 11 separate dates. Laughter. Music. "It's good to be in charge." Her voice boomed through the speakers on the final clip. Gasps rippled through the hall like a wave. Phones came out. Recording. Karen's face drained of color. "That's taken completely out of context. Turn it off." I paused on the frame where she was toasting her own leadership. "You called this meeting to expose me," I said quietly. "But the only thing exposed is you using my private property like your personal resort for years." I slid the county GIS map and Arthur's signed survey across the table. Official boundary lines. Half that deck is on my lot. You've been trespassing the entire time. A voice from the back, Arthur himself, stood up. That's correct. I surveyed it myself. The HOA has no legal claim. The room erupted. Karen clutched the podium, knuckles white. This is doctored. We'll fight this in court. The doors at the back opened with a slow creak. The same deputy from the pool day walked in, badge catching the light. Karen's head snapped toward him like a lifeline. Officer, thank God. You saw what he did. The deputy didn't smile. He set a single sheet of paper on the table in front of her. Ma'am, that's the police report you filed claiming Mr. Hayes stole HOA property and committed trespass. We reviewed the footage and the deed. It's false. You wasted department resources and filed a false report. Silence crashed over the hall, so hard you could hear the fluorescent lights buzzing. Karen's mouth opened, closed, opened again. No sound came out. The deputy continued, calm as Sunday morning. There won't be charges tonight, but the department will be investigating HOA misconduct. I suggest everyone here take a good look at those bylaws you love so much. They don't override county law. Board members started sliding their chairs back. One whispered, You told us it was community-owned. Victoria, another. You said the sheriff was on our side. Karen's kingdom cracked right there under the cheap fluorescence. The motion to suspend all HOA authority passed in 30 seconds flat. She stood alone behind the podium, trembling, while people filed out shaking their heads, some filming, some actually apologizing to me on their way past. I packed my laptop, looked her dead in the eye, and said the only thing left to say. There are still rules, Karen. You just forgot they apply to you too. The quiet applause that followed wasn't loud. It was exhausted relief, the sound of an entire neighborhood finally exhaling after years of holding its breath. By morning, the meeting footage was everywhere. Local Facebook groups, Reddit, even the town paper ran the headline. HOA president exposed after locking herself out of neighbor's pool. Karen's house went dark within days. Blinds drawn. For sale sign crooked in the yard like it was embarrassed to be there. 2 months later, the moving truck came and she left without a single goodbye. The HOA board dissolved. Pinecrest switched to a voluntary association. No fines, no threats, just people talking like actual neighbors again. I repainted the gate, hung a simple metal plaque that reads, Private property, shared respect, and opened the pool to anyone who asked nicely. Kids splash there now. Families bring lemonade. Nobody keeps score. Sometimes at sunset I sit on the same chair Karen once claimed and watch the water turn gold. I think about how power hides behind polite smiles and pastel newsletters until someone finally draws a line. Justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just the soft click of a lock and the slow crumble of an empire built on other people's fear. So here's the question that keeps me up at night, and maybe you too. When a neighborhood association claims something that was never theirs and everyone goes along because it's easier, who's really the one breaking the rules? The person who finally says no? Or the smiling tyrant who rewrote the deed with a clipboard? Drop your answer below. Because the next HOA Karen might be watching, and she's already taking notes.